I want to have some crazy cookouts on the road, so I built this ginormous kitchen unit. Now let's roll back the clock a bit. We've got 4 main parts to this build. First, the big housing that holds everything in place. Then a removable bed extension, which ties all the modules together. After that, it's time to build the massive pull-out drawer. And finally, we get to put it all together. This episode's gonna be packed, so let's get right into it. Got all the plywood for the housing, cut the size and squared up. So let's have a look at the design real quick. We've got quite a bit of room left to play with in the back. And besides the fridge, the main structure will be a massive wooden box, which houses a big drawer supported by some heavy duty pulls. And in the front, I want an additional small prep and sink space. And we obviously need some openings to make it all functional and especially a lot lighter. Then there's going to be an 18-liter water tank sitting in here, right by the opening for the foldable sink, a little bathroom cupboard in the back, and the big main kitchen cabinet on the left. And finally, we're going to add some proper stainless steel countertops. Well, I need a break, and I think the router deserves one too. So with the edges rounded off, for the next step we're going to take a look into this package. So first, we have the big water tank, which is gonna sit in the drawer. Some super strong double-sided tape to get the stainless sticking to the wood. And then some dowels, which we'll use together with this new little tool, which should help us find the centers of the board edges. But now that I'm looking at it, it might be too wide for 12mm. Well, it just about fits. So there should be multiple inserts in here for 6, 8 and 10mm, and also some drill bits with a depth stop. And together with those transfer pins, that should make it pretty easy to get some dowels in here and make this otherwise pretty flimsy connection much sturdier. Now so far so good, and all the dowels line up perfectly, and the box couldn't be any more square. So now we just gotta pre-drill some screw holes, then finish up the inside so it's ready for paint, and then we can get the first glue up going. Now there's a huge thunderstorm coming our way, so yeah, that's gonna be fun. Now those were some quite dark clouds, but the thunderstorm wasn't even nearly as bad as it showed on the app. I also checked the footage and I saw that I got a lightning on there, so yeah, that's pretty cool. After gluing the sides together, which by the way was so easy with the dowels and the pre-drilling and all that stuff, we gotta get the bottom and then the top on, and here it's incredibly important to get everything perfectly square, because the drawer pulls, which are gonna be mounted down here, only allow a tolerance of 0.5mm. But since I matched both the bottom and the top up with a flush cut bit, everything should work out fine as long as we follow the edges out here. I don't want the screws on the top to be visible, so I'm gonna do the little dowel trick again, and it is a bit sketchy because it's right on the edge, but I think once glued in and sanded it shouldn't look too bad, especially since only the top is gonna be visible and the side only on a little part over here. So now we have a little countersunk part for the screw head and then the big opening for the dowel. So I've got the box roughly finished up and put it into dry fit. And the little dowel trick worked kind of okay-ish. The edges are looking pretty clean, but I think the screws I used were a bit too big and now the wood is bulging a bit. But hopefully that won't show in the end. Now we still need to drill some holes to fix it to the airline racks down below. In the last episode we ground down those square screw thingies, whatever those were. And they kind of worked, but they were a bit hard to move. And it was a pain to get the sleeping module in. So I went shopping again and I think I found a pretty good solution. And I've got no clue why I didn't just order that from the get-go, but I just didn't see it, I guess. So some more gloves, some bolts, spring rings, and then in here, if I measured out everything correctly, let's see if this works any better. Oh, well, I don't know. Sure is a bit flimsy. Maybe if we get a washer, then it might work better. So the box is in and it doesn't move at all. It's super solid. So I think the drawer should hold up quite well in the end. So that's as far as we're going to get the kitchen housing for now. And the next step is going to be to make the removable bed platform, which means adding a bunch of support pieces at the exact same height all around the little opening in here. And then cut a piece of plywood to size, which is going to fit in the middle. But since I don't have enough of the thick 15mm plywood left, we got to go to the store real quick. And since it's already summer, I think it's time to get the winter tires off and put the summer ones on. So I picked up the wood panel and also some more dowels, but first we gotta cut those strips to size, which we'll then glue onto the sides of the furniture. Now I've got all those edge pieces done, and once the paint is fully cured we can install them. And I'm pretty happy with this tricky angled one, but it fits pretty much perfect. Next up I want to start with the panel for in here. That's also going to help us align all the framing pieces later on where we're going to glue them in. But for now let's make a template and then cut the piece to size. The new panel fits really well in there, and I've clamped the support pieces all around the edges. So next up, we get to screw and glue in all of these pieces. With all of those glued up, we're back to finishing the housing for the drawer. And I finally received those two pretty important packages. So let's open them up real quick. Now the first one's incredibly heavy because in here are the two drawer pulls. And since there's going to be quite a lot of leverage and weight on the drawer, I had to go for some super beefy ones, and they are rated up to I think 300 kilos, but we're obviously not going to go anywhere near that. And to mount them to the housing, I got a bunch of ribbon nuts, bolts and thread locker. So let's measure it all up now, and we can drill the holes, paint the inside and finally finish up the outside, and we're done with the housing. Right at the end of the van build, I figured out a little trick. If you glue up stuff and let the ceiling cure for like 2 hours, it's the perfect consistency to just kind of peel up without any residue. That would have come in so handy before. Got it all sanded and prepped for paint, so let's get this stuff on. The kitchen housing is all done, which means we can finally cross off the first item on our to-do list. Then next up, the bed extension, which is almost done. I finished up the little railings over here and gave another coat of paint, so we only need to finish up this panel. But first we gotta get back to making some noise. Got all the measurements, and it's gonna be quite a complicated job to get it all cut out. And I just figured out that I somehow messed up calculating how much wood I need, and I don't have enough for this big piece. And all the hardware stores around here are completely out of stock, so we gotta take the van for a drive over lunch again. Yeah, that sucks. That was a bit too big of a task for my little router. I've let it cool down for half an hour and it's still almost too hot to touch. So now I've got all the panels cut to size and squared up, which means the real work begins, transferring all the openings, and then once again drilling, cutting the pieces out, rounding the edges, all of that good stuff. And I just looked at the weather report, and next week almost every single day is going to be above 32 degrees. It's going to be a nightmare, and I really got to get this kitchen done. It's pretty mean, but one of our neighbors is having a barbecue and it smells so good and I'm super hungry. Now it has gotten pretty messy in here from the van build, so I better get it all cleaned up right now. How do the other YouTubers do that? Like, seriously. Now it worked. Oh, obviously, I'm just kidding. That took me 6 hours. I did have to carry all the stuff downstairs into the basement. Like all the leftover woods, the tires, all of that stuff. Then we've got a ton of cardboard I gotta bring to the recycling yard. But talking about the basement, it's time for one more quick side quest. So that's what I mean with lots of wood I had to carry down. Those are all filled, and then there's wood in here, over here, and all of that stuff. And I took the time to reorganize it a bit. Now we're gonna try out the solar panel on the roof box, because as you can see, unfortunately, it isn't flat at all. There was no such model available, so I'm gonna have to order some ABS sheets to cut the size and then glue on, so the solar panel has a flat surface. And for that, we're gonna take some measurements. So I've shown you the panel, I think 2 episodes ago. I went for one of those flexible sticky backing solar panels. It has 200 watts and technically it's a bit too big for the roof box, but yeah, we gotta make that work. Now it actually fits way better than I expected. If we line it up all the way to the front edges over here, then there's only like 5 millimeters of overhang in the back, and the black sticky tapes line up perfectly with those ribs. So the only thing we gotta do is make a second rib over here, and then we're good to go. Also, please excuse the bad lighting in here. Before cleaning up all the edges on those pieces, we gotta quickly work on the bottom of the drawer. And here I'm putting in 4 recesses with this big bit, and that should shave off about another kilogram of wood. And then also, the stainless arrived for the sink and the countertop as well. So I got the markings transferred on here, and we can cut out this piece as well. And then we gotta sand the router bits because they are super dull. Now that sure left a huge mess. That's how it should end up looking. It's time for the double check again. And I gotta glue this stuff up in multiple stages. First I'm gonna glue those 3 pieces together. Then we can glue that assembly plus the side wall to the floor. Then the third step's gotta be the front and the back. And then finally the top can go on. All those time lapses you just saw took like 3 days of prepping and sanding before actually doing the glue ups, and I'm just not getting much work done because right now it's 33 degrees and even in the garage it's just super hot. Now we've got the main structure of the drawer glued up, and I've also finished the top frame, which I'm not going to glue in just yet though, because it's going to be easier to paint the inside without the top on. Then I cleaned up both sides, so now we can figure out where we have to drill the holes for the drawer pulls. But first I gotta tell you how excited I am. I posted the battery episode a few days ago and it kind of blew up. It's already at 5,600 views, which is insane for this channel, and I got like 100 more subscribers, so that's just super awesome to have you all on board. But still, only about 10% of my viewers are subscribed, so make sure to hit that button and the bell to always get notified when a new episode drops. And without spoiling too much, you definitely don't want to miss the next few weeks because there's going to be a completely insane project. Alright, now back to the drawer. Now this fits really well. So instead of clamps, I just use 2 pieces of plywood, and that gives us the perfect height for the drawer. Now the only problem is up here, gap is a bit inconsistent. So what I'm gonna do is mark up one side, then measure out the distance from the bottom to the holes, and then transfer those measurements over here. Then we should get a perfectly level drawer. Now with that done, let's get out of the heat and into the paint shop. After way too long, I think we can finally call the drawer done. Today is already day 16 of the kitchen build, and I don't think a single episode has ever taken that long. At least I could spend most of the time during the heat wave down in the cold wood shop. There is supposed to be another one though. Oh, and also I finished the panel for the bed extension, so that's another thing we can cross off our list. And with that we can finally move on to the last part of the build, putting everything together, which means the plywood and the stainless for the sink, and a bunch of hardware I ordered. Some stainless steel hinges, and those were so expensive. They cost 15 euros each. Then some corresponding stainless bolts, way too many of those hooks. And then what ties everything together are these metal cables with a bunch of carabiners. And I've got no clue why there's washing instructions on there. Now I had no clue that drilling stainless steel is this difficult. I just thought I can use a normal metal drill, but no chance with this one. So I just put in an order for some cobalt drills and I can pick them up tomorrow, so let's try again then. Now that was 10 bucks well spent, and apparently bike chain oil works as well. Now I'm really happy to have gone for the expensive hinges because it doesn't make a single noise and it's just super smooth. So now on to getting the hooks on and then installing these cables so the lid is supported once it's down. Now we're gonna make sure that both cables have the same tension on them, and for that we just gotta listen carefully. That's a bit higher pitched, which means too much tension, so we gotta loosen it up a bit. And yeah, we're gonna tune my kitchen box. Might as well be the first human in existence who has said those words. But yeah, it's looking pretty good, I think. Just want to test the sink out again. I love this thing. So now it is much better tuned, and I added a second hook so we can keep it closed during the drive. Now let's try it out with the water tank. So if I have the little sink in there, I can wash up, I don't know, some berries or my hands on the road. It is pretty small, but I think it's kind of cute. But also I don't have to flip this down, and the little water spout still reaches over the little edge. So that's also part of the design and the reason why this part is super slim. But all in all, it turned out extremely stable. Now, doesn't that look insanely good? I'm so happy that I chose stainless steel. It's gonna be a pain to keep clean, but yeah, I think it's worth it. Now that's really bad. The right drawer is just completely stuck in a closed position and there's no way to get to any of the bolts.
3 hours later.
The drawer is finally out again, at least halfway. Those were probably the 3 longest hours of my life. I already thought I gotta completely cancel my summer plans. Because just to reiterate, when the drawer pulls are closed, you can't access any of the bolts, which means if it's locked in place, then yeah, it's locked in place. I already got the drill set up to drill out the bolts, but I wasn't too sure if that would work, so I thought I'm gonna have a look at it again. And I found a little hint, but I just couldn't believe that there was such a big manufacturing issue. Let me show you what was wrong. So that's the good side. You can see a little hook which is bent this way, and then the corresponding latch, which is pretty much horizontal, and that has to go underneath that little hook. And then on the bad side, now keep in mind, I already kind of bent it so it works, but this hook was coming down way too far, and then the latch was bent upwards, so there was no way of getting it through. I thought the issue was with this pull cable and the latch which sits in the middle of the drawer, and then would have just been a complete write-off. Also, I had to take the little flap off, and since I bolted those in with Loctite, and of course I went with the super strong one, I just pulled those inserts right off, and everything's gonna be a little bit of a mess. Also got some screwdriver marks now, and from the rubber mallet, because I was just hammering around for 3 hours. But one more thing I managed to do yesterday, I got these rubber non-slip mats in, which should help keep the water tank in place. But now let's bend everything back again, then we can get the fridge and the cooktop out, and finally see how the kitchen looks all done. Looking much better, and I gave the stainless a clean. Now I've got 3 things to unbox. Well, actually 2. Also picked up this new vlogging camera yesterday. So by now you might have an idea what's happening this summer. Now let's take a look at my cooking method. And I don't think I've actually explained you, but I'm not gonna have any gas in the van. Well, it runs on natural gas, but besides that, it's all with electricity. So I've got 2 outlets, which combined have 3.5 kilowatts of power. So I went for an induction hob, and I gotta admit, I tried it out at home, just so I don't miss the return window. And I got one which has this flat top, which I thought is pretty neat. And it also included a filling lid, and the power cable is exactly long enough to plug into the outlet. So if the heating's sorted, let's get over to the cooling. And I gotta say, I had to measure again, because, I don't know, it kind of looked like this fridge was way too big for the opening over here. But let's make some room, and of course I planned it so that the stove fits right under the little enclosure, and this definitely isn't a single-handed operation. Oh, I don't want to break it again. Alright, now this thing was advertised as dual zone, which means it has 2 separately controllable zones, but then when I got it, it turns out you can only control the big box, and then this one's just gonna be like 15 degrees warmer, which is a bit unfortunate because I thought I'm gonna have a freezer and a fridge or some ice cream on the road or whatever. So you can power it with 240 volts, but also 12 volts, and for that, I'm not sure if you remember, but we put in this little cigarette lighter with a switch, so we don't have a big cable mess in the end. Now look at that, it fits perfectly. It's just a little bit shorter as the rest, and that's where the mattress is gonna be on. And there's plenty of room in the back for the compressor to vent out. Let's try this out. Well, that's not good. Well, it was just a plug that wasn't plugged in properly. So now it all works, and we can set the temperature from, I don't know, like 20 degrees down to, I think, like -20. Now the compressor just kicked in, but it's so silent. Also, I really like this net where I can put in stuff like sunscreen. And if you're wondering why I didn't put the fridge on drawers as well, it's just that it would have added like 5 centimeters of height, and then I already don't have too much headroom. So I thought that's a compromise that I'm gonna make. And when I'm on the road alone, which is probably gonna be most of the time, then I'm not gonna have a mattress which spans all the way, so I can just move it to the side and open the fridge. And with that, we can call the kitchen build done. Sure was a bit nerve-wracking in the end, but I'm really happy with the result. So please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the build, and I'm gonna see you next week for the big announcement.